A Michigan court case captures national attention. The shutdown is over. A new man is in charge of Michigan's money, and a war of words out of Detroit City Hall. Join us right now for MiWeek.
Michigan's turnaround is being powered by things we do better than anywhere else in the world. Today's global leaders routinely turn to Michigan to work on their most difficult problems. That's because the engineering talent in this part of the world is simply the best. So many possibilities lie ahead for Michigan's future. These opportunities are here and starting to happen. The vision for the new Michigan. Share it, talk it up, drive it home. Funding is also provided by Delta.
Hi there and welcome to MiWeek. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Christy McDonald. Michigan's Attorney General in Washington in front of the Supreme Court this week over the state's ban on affirmative action. And Congress, well, it gets its act together over the shutdown and the debt ceiling. But will voters forgive them next year? There's a new man in charge of Michigan's finances after the resignation of State Treasurer Andy Dillon. But we start tonight with Detroit City Hall and the accusations that Detroit EM Kevin Orr isn't competent to run city operations. Who said that? Well, Mayor Dave Bing in a deposition about the city's bankruptcy. We know that there is no love lost between the two. Orr's appointment sidelined Bing pretty much, but is Orr getting the job done? And this comes the same week as the city's CFO resigns after making a racially charged comment. Let's get started tonight with our MiWeek contributors and the editorial page editors of the Detroit News and Detroit Free Press, Nolan, Finley, and Stephen Henderson. Gentlemen, it's always good to see you.
Good to be here.
We have a lot to talk about this week, but I want to start off with this little war of the words at City Hall. I was slightly surprised that Dave Bing has kind of come out swinging in his last couple of months in office. Are you surprised by this?
Well, if there were any sort of consistency to Dave Bing and his remarks about the situation in Detroit, you might be surprised. But, you know, one day he's on board, the next day he's off board. I thought it was really sad yesterday to hear him say that. Really unfortunate, actually, to hear him talk about Kevin Orr not being able to run the city and being incompetent. And you know what was going through people's mind as he was saying that is, wait a minute, who got us to this point? And I thought he left himself wide open, and he would be better off just, you know, sort of going out with some class, some grace, and basically keeping his mouth shut.
Is he trying to protect his legacy in some sense, Stephen, or why is he coming out like this?
If he is, this is an odd way to do it. I think his feelings are hurt. This is a guy with a lot of pride, and I think rightfully feels like he did this job out of a sense of obligation and is probably owed some respect and deference for that. And Kevin Orr, that's not what he's here for. He's here to fix the mess that we're in, and he's not worried about Dave Bing's feelings. And so, the mayor's a little cranky about that, and that's how he looks here. It's like cranky, right? It's not even anger so much as he just seems grumpy about it. At the same time, I think he's making a valid point about the difficulty that Kevin is having managing city operations. It's not going as well as management of the bankruptcy for a lot of reasons that are Dave Bing's fault.
Is he incompetent, though?
He's not incompetent, but he does not have a track record of he's never run anything more than a lemonade stand in his life. He is a bankruptcy attorney, and he's very, very highly skilled at that. He's not, running city government is very complicated, and I think he pretty soon is going to need a partner who is experienced at that to help him restructure. Dave Bing was supposed to be that partner. That was the original framework of this, and of course he got here and discovered that Dave Bing is part of the problem in City Hall.
So you look at all good relationships and then you wonder where it went wrong. What went wrong here?
Well, I don't think they ever had a very good relationship, and you can understand that it was a difficult decision for Bing to get into. But he did bring Gary Brown in and put him in charge of restructuring.
What's Gary run before?
Well, Gary Brown comes out of the city council. In terms of political leadership, he's about
political leadership,
and that's what we've had in terms of the mayor's office. If you're looking for a surrogate mayor to run operations, Gary Brown would fit that bill. He's also brought in, what are we paying a month in consultants? You would think those consultants would have some expertise in management. I don't think that the city is being run any worse than it was run before Kevin Orr came into office. And I would suggest it's being run a lot better. You're going to see the fruits of things you're already seeing.
Some stuff will start to come online.
Of a lot of things. But to me, it just highlights the impossible situation that we're in here, where you have an elected mayor and an emergency manager, and it's only going to get worse in January when a new mayor
and that's what I think is the big problem.
That's what we can't afford to have. We cannot afford to have that. In fact,
how do you avoid it?
What we need is for whoever the new mayor is, whether it's Mike Duggan or Benny Napoleon, to become that partner in restructuring government. Because the truth is, Kevin cannot do it with consultants who are not going to be here long term, and he can't do it with Gary Brown, who I adore Gary in terms of his service on council, but he doesn't have the kind of managerial experience you're talking about. You have got to have somebody in there who can put a team together to actually manage the city going forward better than we've have in the past.
But given the comments that you've already heard from Benny Napoleon and Mike Duggan, this is going to be an uphill battle, because they already want Kevin Orr out tomorrow.
And Mike Duggan is convinced that as soon as he's elected, Rick Snyder's going to say, "Well, you're gone, Kevin Orr." Now he's making the case that, well, Kevin can run the bankruptcy, I'll run the city operation. It's not going to work like that. They're too intertwined. And if the new mayor comes in, I agree with Steve. They need to work together. And if you could rely on the new mayor to handle operations, that would be a perfect scenario. But I'm not sure you can rely on either one of these guys to get on board, take that, what's still going to be a subservient role, and cooperate, not obstruct.
The key to this is going to be
big egos.
Who is the new mayor going to be able to surround themselves with, right? This has been the problem in City Hall forever. Dave Bing would have been a much more successful mayor if he could have attracted higher caliber talent and kept it. Of course, his biggest problem was the revolving door. 55 people coming and going over 4 years. You're not going to get a lot done. Can Mike Duggan attract better people who will stay to run these departments? That is the problem that Kevin has now, is that there's nobody to execute the restructuring that he's talking about. And that, I think, does fall on Dave Bing, who hired these department heads, has never held them accountable, they don't even have performance management going on in
But he was offered the opportunity when he came into office. He was offered all sorts of assistance by the business community. We will loan you executives, and he didn't take advantage of that.
Why didn't he take advantage of that, do you think, Nolan?
I have no idea. I think he surrounded himself with people who gave him a lot of bad advice in the beginning.
Well, I also think loaned executives would have helped early on, but you still had to create a stable, competent core of managers in City Hall to run city departments, and we have not had that.
Had you been able to fix the structure and made it a more functional place, it would have been more attractive for people to come in. And I think that's going to be the challenge. But my big worry is you get these two big egos together, and a new mayor is going to want to assert himself, is not going to want to go to the shadows. How do you keep them from butting heads publicly?
And you've got a new council that's going to want to assert itself as well.
That's going to want to be in the mix and having some say. I think this all starts on November 6th, right?
Exactly.
You have got to get all of these people in a room and start figuring out not just how it's going to work in January, but how it's going to work in September if Kevin Orr leaves and we go back to elected governors.
And Orr's worried about this. The governor's office is worried about this. I mean, they're not going to be surprised by it. I don't know if they'll have a solution in place, but they're very much working on this idea of how do we mesh the new elected officials with the emergency manager, because there's only so much authority and power Kevin Orr can cede and still trust that these elected officials won't walk the city off the dock again.
Now, the mayor has said that Orr has not gone and done a lot of the infrastructure. They're still concerned about crime, the fire department, police department, the lighting, the buses. Is that fair criticism for Kevin Orr?
It's not fair criticism coming from someone who had 5 years or 6 years to do it. What is it, 6, 7?
5.
And didn't do it. It would be fair criticism perhaps, and I don't think it's fair from anyone because he hasn't had that much time, and he is putting things in place that will pay off. But it's not fair criticism for the guy who didn't get it done. For whatever reason, he didn't get it done.
Yeah, the timing here is not fair. It's been 7 months. You were not going to fix DPD or DFD in that time. I think where the criticism has merit is in that Kevin has not even put in the infrastructure yet to be able to manage that stuff going forward. And even the consultants are somewhat frustrated by the inability for the stuff that they're coming up with to be executed.
So what's the problem? Is it because he's concentrating too much on the financial and the bankruptcy, or what?
You have a broken culture
Yeah.
in City Hall.
Right.
And that's been true. That was the same thing that's
So then can
stifled.
anybody do this job? I mean, if
Yeah. See, and
Yeah,
that's the
you
thing.
can, but
Kevin
over-
has much more power than any mayor has had before, and I think the expectation was that he'd come in and wipe out a lot of this culture that
believe he
wasn't
will.
working. I think he will. I hope he will. I think there are some early wins I might have gone for quicker if I were him, and he'd have some stuff to show for it. It is not valid criticism, as you said, coming from a guy who sat around for 5 years and didn't do it.
Kevin Orr had to prioritize. I mean, Kevin Orr has
Right.
right
And the
now
finances come
a
first.
huge challenge on his hand
Yeah.
working with those creditors.
Yeah.
There'll come a point when this all goes into the bankruptcy court, all that negotiating, all of that hard work will be passed, and he will
Yeah.
turn his attention then, I think
I
to
think that's right.
restructuring. But you've got to change top to bottom the culture of City Hall.
does it reflect poorly on him that the CFO resigned this week after that racially insensitive
It's
comment? That he
embarrassing,
made?
right?
Of course. I mean, you never know what somebody's going to say, and this guy.
But the
said
fact that it was known that it was
dumbest
said, and it was like, well, we'll think about it, and then he'll resign.
Yeah.
Being said, I would have fired him immediately.
Well, the problem with Dave Bing is he never would have hired someone like Jim Bonsall with that skill set in the first place. And we know that's true because we have 5 years of a record to show that he could not attract talent at that level. Now, this guy turns out to be an insensitive
Talent
lout
who doesn't know how to
who's got
speak
to
correctly
go.
to people.
But,
that
he
doesn't.
was
Yeah.
extremely good
Yeah.
at what he
And-
did. He was the kind of fellow you need in City Hall. He just is clueless about what you can.
You think about, they're talking in City Hall about how close they are to having a balance sheet that's actually in balance. That's the work that this guy's been doing since he's been here. You want to pick that up and not turn it back over to the people who had it out of whack in the first place.
But how you can hear yourself saying that and not realize you're about to.
That's absolutely
Self-destruct.
that's absolutely unacceptable. But I do agree with what you say, Stephen and Nolan, that this is going to start the day after the election. That
Yeah.
whoever is going to be mayor, or else you're going to be hearing a lot more from that mayor than you were even hearing the complaining from Dave Bing. That it kind of dribs and drabs came out. He complained and then he's quiet for a while, and then he complains again and he's quiet.
Well, I think it's going to be worse than that. I mean, Dave whines, complains, grumbles, but. These guys, I think, will be actively obstructive
And they will
if
be
they don't
assertive.
sign on.
Well, and they each want to be sure that there is a plan to get elected officials back in charge. And I think the governor and Kevin have got to negotiate that out before January 1st.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, moving on now. Congress finally has a deal, ending the shutdown, raising the debt ceiling. But what impact will the fighting have on politicians keeping their seats next year, especially here in Michigan? Obviously, we've talked about how this is how politics works. Things get done. There's a little trouble here, a little trouble there. All's well that ends well. But some polls that have been out have shown the American people are fed up with this and that they want to kick out who is in Congress. Now, whether that actually happens next year,
Well, they've
that's
been doing
a
that
question.
now for 3 election cycles. And, I would caution that it's a year out. And a lot of events can influence the election over the next year. This wasn't the first showdown they've had. It won't be the last. And one of the problems is they're all thinking too much about the next election instead of thinking about the actual problem. We've now got the government back open running again. We've got another temporary deal. But once again, we've done nothing to address the core issue here. And that core issue is that we're lurching from crisis to crisis without a budget. We haven't had an annual budget in 5 years. That's unacceptable. And they can't let the next deadline come and go without putting a budget in place.
Yeah, so we could see this in another 3 months or so. Stephen, is there anyone who could be in trouble in Michigan in terms of a congressional delegation?
Well, I mean, again, I think part of the problem is that the news cycle moves so fast now, and it moves from this to that to this to that.
But we have a short attention span.
Well,
Squirrel.
yeah,
We're looking
and
over
so
there. Where are we
people
going
who
next?
are mad this week about Congress in 2 months will be mad about something else or paying
Do you
attention
really
to something
think
else.
so, or did this impact people so much, more than you think, and that people are maybe fed up for the last time that this
I
is?
don't know. I
You
mean,
look at the polls. Steve Mitchell did a poll this week in Michigan. Were you affected by the shutdown. 80% said no. I mean, I think they're frustrated by the silliness and by the spectacle, but unless your life was impacted some way, you're not, that
and that's unfortunate because, of course, this cost us $24 billion. You had 800,000 people out of work for 3 weeks.
These guys fritter away $24 billion over lunch.
But, you know, you're the one complaining about that.
I know, but I'm talking about the impact on the American people.
It's an impact.
What's going to
it's not nothing.
What's going to catch their mind here, what's going to influence the next election, in my mind, is this Obamacare disaster. We still...
You guys have been saying that for 6 years.
And now it's
You've lost every election that's come up.
Now it's unfolding. People can't sign on to the exchanges still.
Medicare Part D was the same way.
They can't. No, it wasn't.
Sure
They
it was.
can't sign on to the exchanges still. You were at risk of a lot of people on January 1st not having been dumped on the exchanges they can't sign on to. I've been getting furious letters all week from these people who've been told their private insurance is going to double and triple. 150,000 people last week. Obamacare is going to be the issue next year.
All right. Well, we'll take a look at that. I mean, that's a different
Republicans have been threatening
topic.
You know,
write that down. Well, it was in 2010.
We should roll the tape from last year after the Supreme Court upheld Obamacare, and Nolan sat here and said this will be the issue in November.
Because the impact hadn't touched people, but it certainly was the issue in 2010 when Democrats got routed.
All right, let's
and it
jump.
could be again in 2014.
Well,
Let's jump from Obamacare real quick and to the general silliness. Then you said, you know what, this is silliness, and whether people were impacted by the shutdown or not, that may not influence their vote. I would argue, or can you make the argument that people should be annoyed by the silliness?
People should be annoyed by the
annoyed enough to make
silliness.
a change.
They should be annoyed that you know, the grown-ups are not sufficiently in charge. Here you have a great example of the grown-ups sort of taking charge and saying, here's how we solve this, right? You had Republicans and Democrats in the Senate, 14 of them, sit down and hammer out a deal. But of course, it's a short-term deal, and it's not dealing with these larger issues. We have a fundamental disagreement in this country about several things that we got to work out.
Oh, but Ron Fournier in the National Journal this morning wrote an excellent piece, an excellent analysis. I'd urge everyone to look that up. I mean, and he posed the question, what will the president do now? The president scored a political victory. Will he keep focused on politics and campaigning, or will he now lead? And there's an opportunity here to say, okay, we're through this. We negotiated this deal. Let's sit down and negotiate a broader deal that trades some of what I want for some of what you want.
I actually think
after 5 years, get a budget in place. Because ultimately, dysfunction in an organization at this level will land at the feet of the CEO.
I actually think the smarter route would be to keep the president somewhat out of this. This Gang of 14 in the Senate didn't have the president much involved in that. I think there's an opportunity for some leadership there on their part. It depoliticizes it by leaving the president, who some people just see red every time they think about him. You leave him out of it, and you get some of this stuff worked out.
All right, we'll see.
Out of it. Democrats in the Senate aren't going to do anything without his sign.
Well, but they just did.
All right, well, moving on, the Supreme Court listened to arguments this week on Michigan's ban on affirmative action. All right, so Stephen, let me ask you, as our resident Supreme Court expert.
And U of M graduate.
And U of M graduate. How is it shaping up in the court, do you think, looking at this decision?
I don't think there's any question the court will uphold Michigan's right to do what it did and say, we don't want to have race-conscious policies in admissions. I think that's bad policy, and I disagree with it. But I don't think there's anything unconstitutional about it, and I think the plaintiffs here, or the respondents in this case, are putting their hopes on Anthony Kennedy wrongly. Justice Kennedy is a swing vote, but he sees affirmative action. If you go back and read his former opinions, he sees affirmative action as a form of discrimination, not anti-discrimination. So you've got a real mismatch there.
And I don't think the core issue is whether affirmative action is good or bad. It's the people's right to make this kind of policy, and I think the court will uphold that. And the question becomes, what do institutions like the University of Michigan do to accomplish the goals without having the affirmative action
of getting a more
policies in
diverse
place.
student body.
And other states have dealt with this. Other universities have dealt with this, and they've done things that the U of M haven't done. And I think they're going to have to look at other solutions to this.
What solutions are you talking about?
Well,
Nolan?
other states have, for example, ended legacy enrollments for their graduates, so that if you went to U of M, your kid gets an edge in getting in the door. Other states have done affirmative action based on economics rather than race, which is perfectly acceptable under this past Supreme Court rulings. Other states like Texas have taken the top graduates from every high school and let them in. Some combination of that or one choice would help U of M better diversify its campus.
Well, you could try some of those, and some of them are better than others. Some of them produce better results than others. The 10% plans, I think, are absurd because they fly in the face of the kind of individualized consideration the court said you should be giving to every student anyway. But I also want to make it clear that I think it's absurd that we want to have this argument about eliminating racial considerations just in higher ed and pretend that there's color blindness everywhere else, and so that it belongs there. Of course, this is not a colorblind society. There's a lot of things that happen still because of the legacy of the awful racial discrimination that used to be part of the law and the Constitution in this country. We got to deal with that, I think, in a much more honest way than saying, well, let's just have race-neutral policies only at the point where we're talking about who gets opportunity and who doesn't.
But other states that don't have the affirmative action policies, who put bans in place, have managed to get around it with a combination of measures and maintain the sort of percentage they want. U of M
Some
hasn't.
of them have, yeah.
Now, one of the things at work here that they have to examine is the increasing number of out-of-state students at Michigan and Michigan State.
Sure.
We're now pushing close to 50% to get that higher tuition and more revenue in.
Yeah.
Those tend not to be minority students.
Yeah.
And I think that's another area they need to look at.
All right, and we will be watching to see how that all unfolds. All right, Andy Dillon out, Kevin Clinton in. Dillon resigned as the state treasurer last week, and it's now Clinton's job not only to manage billions of dollars in state money, but he'll be the only one looking at Michigan cities and school districts to see how financially healthy they are. So what do we know about Kevin Clinton? Nolan?
I don't know a whole lot about him. The governor has a lot of faith with him. He started out, in the insurance area for the governor, and he promoted him once. Now he's promoted him twice. So far, Snyder's been a pretty good judge of talent and people he's picked to help him run things. I'm sad to see Andy Dillon go. I thought Andy Dillon was a good treasurer. I thought he handled these financial crises very well. He's been working to keep Wayne County out of emergency manager, but unfortunately his personal life got the better of him, and he had to get out.
Now you have a fresh set of eyes on a lot of these troubled cities and counties, talking about Wayne County.
Yeah.
What kind of job does he have in front of him?
I think he's got a lot of issues to address. Wayne County is just the sort of tip of that iceberg. You got a lot of local governments that are in a lot of trouble. Far too many to deal with through the emergency management process. You couldn't create enough emergency managers to run all these places. We'd still have to have this real look at the structure of government here. How much local government can we afford, and how can we deliver services maybe in a more efficient way? And one of my frustrations with the governor has been the slow pace of getting to that point. Hopefully, maybe this new treasurer has a different view of that. Maybe a second term, if Snyder wins next year, he'll feel a little more politically comfortable in pushing that issue. But we got a lot of local government problems. There's not enough money to sustain all this stuff.
People would argue that the last couple of years that Andy Dillon has been in office have been possibly the most difficult because of everything he's had to deal with Detroit and the financial emergency there. Would you say that the next couple of years for a treasurer could be the most difficult?
I don't know. I mean, U of M had a study out a couple of weeks ago that said, interviewed local governments, and the larger governments in particular are doing a little better, are starting to feel the effects of a recovering economy. And it very well could be, as the state economy recovers, and it is recovering at a faster pace than the rest of the nation, that a lot of these people that have been sort of on the border of financial distress find themselves out of it. Now, if that happens, they need to use that opportunity to put in place efficiencies, shared services, what have you, to make sure the next downturn they don't end up in the same place. But we went through a huge economic downturn in this state, and it's not surprising we have a lot of communities in distress.
Long road. All right, well, let's talk about really the biggest story that's happening in the state this week. It's the Tigers. Are they killing you or what? It has been nail-biting
Till
watching
1 o'clock
this.
every night watching these guys just torture us.
Oh, it's been great though, huh? Nolan, you're going to the game tonight?
I am going to the game, and you know, you look at a game like last night and you think, wow, this is the best team in baseball. They can pitch, they can hit, and the pitching has been, at least the starting pitching,
has been great,
been
right?
the best probably I've ever seen in baseball.
Oh yeah, there's no question.
And
this is the best rotation.
And when you look at the hitters you should have on this team, Cabrera and Fielder and Peralta and on, you know, you would think that these are big bats. They're paid to be big bats, and they
all year
they're
they've
not
struggled
hitting.
hitting good pitching, and that's what kills you in the playoffs because you do not see sloppy pitchers in the postseason.
Oh, I just got to say, I've got a little boy at home, a 7-year-old, who's last year had his heart broken, and this year is like, come on, Tigers. So I'm like, please, we want them
together,
to go.
right?
Get it together. That's right. All right, gentlemen, it's always good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us, and that's going to do it for MiWeek. Thanks so much for watching. Go to MiWeek.org for any shows that you might have missed. I'm Christy McDonald. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Business Leaders for Michigan is dedicated to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and economic growth. Learn more at businessleadersformichigan.com. Funding is also provided by Delta.